The cake knife trembled in his grip, and for a moment Walt Brennan thought it was his hands finally giving out after 62 years until he heard his youngest daughter clapping. The conference room at Harmon Manufacturing still smelled like the cheap coffee they'd been brewing since 1987, 38 years of it. Gold banner on the wall said, "Congratulations, Walt," in letters someone had spent real time on. Sheet cake from Costco, white frosting, his name spelled right for once. Carol stood across the table, paper in her hand, reading words that didn't make sense. Dissolution of marriage, irreconcilable differences, petitioner requests. Lindsay started clapping first. Slow, deliberate, like church applause after a eulogy. Tyler joined, uncertain, looking at his sister for permission. Then Emma, 24 years old, his baby, pumping her fists. Best day ever. The room went silent except for that sound. Hands meeting. His colleagues, frozen mid-smile, cake plates suspended, someone's phone recording. Walt set the knife down on the table, carefully. The last controlled thing he would do in his old life. He didn't fall, he didn't shout. He just stood there, hands flat on the table, while his family applauded the end of him. 3 years later, Walt Brennan still woke at 5:15 every morning, not because he had anywhere to be, but because his body hadn't learned there was nowhere left to go. The coffee maker kicked on at 5:17, same as always. Mr. Coffee, 20 years old, the gurgle and hiss of it filling the kitchen like a conversation he didn't have to answer. Walt stood at the sink in his undershirt and watched frost crawl across the window glass. Late October in Youngstown. The maples on Elderberry Street had gone bare overnight, leaving the yards looking stripped and honest. He made 2 eggs, over easy the way he'd made them for 40 years. Toast from bread he bought at Aldi because nobody was around to tell him Giant Eagle was better. He ate standing at the counter, plate in hand, because sitting at the table meant looking at the empty chairs. The house was small, brick, built in 1962. He was the second owner, paid it off in 2015, 3 years before everything went sideways. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a garage he never parked in because it was full of tools he'd accumulated like evidence of a life. The spare bedroom had become a workshop after Carol left. Sawdust smell, machine oil, a half-finished birdhouse sitting on the bench. He'd started it in spring, couldn't remember why, didn't know who it was for. At 3:15, he walked to the mailbox. Same time every day, rain or shine, or the kind of gray Ohio, nothing that passed for weather most of November. The mailbox was at the end of the driveway, black metal, flag that stuck sometimes. He'd been meaning to fix it. Bills, junk, a grocery circular he'd never read. He carried it all inside and dropped it on the kitchen table, next to yesterday's mail and the day before's. The knock came at 4:30. Doug Phelps stood on the porch with a coffee cup that wasn't his, breath fogging in the cold. 64 years old, retired electrician, widower, lived 3 houses down and had too much time on his hands. "You eating?" Doug said, not waiting to be invited in. "You look like you're not eating." "I eat." "Yeah, and I'm the Pope." Doug settled into the plastic chair on the porch like he owned it, which, in a way, he did. He'd sat there enough times. Marie used to say you could tell a man's soul by his refrigerator. "What's in yours right now?" "Eggs, bread, some lunch meat." "That's not food, that's survival." Walt didn't argue. He took the other chair, the one that faced the street, and let the silence settle. Doug was good at silence, better than most. His wife had died 5 years ago, cancer, the slow kind, and he'd never learned how to be alone. So he showed up on Walt's porch with bad coffee and opinions nobody asked for, and somehow that was enough. "Heard from the kids?" Doug asked. "First time in months." "Nothing to hear." "That's not nothing. That's something." Walt watched a pickup roll past, somebody he didn't recognize. The neighborhood was changing. Young families moving in, fixing up the old places, putting in gardens where there used to be grass. "Furnace is acting up again," he said. Doug let the deflection stand. "I can look at it. Probably the igniter." "Probably." More silence. A dog barked somewhere down the block. The wind picked up, rattling the storm door. "That birdhouse," Doug said, nodding toward the window where the workshop light was visible. "Who's that for?" "Nobody." "Hell of a lot of work for nobody." Walt didn't answer. Doug finished his coffee, or whatever was left of it, and set the cup on the porch rail. "You know, I saw that watch they gave you when I was over last month. Still in the drawer?" Walt's jaw tightened. "It's fine where it is. 38 years and it's fine in a drawer. Doesn't fit anymore." Doug looked at him. Really looked. "The band or the memory?" Walt stood up. "Getting cold. You should head home." Doug nodded, slow, the way he did when he knew he'd pushed far enough. "Same time tomorrow?" "If you want." "I want." He clapped Walt on the shoulder, quick, rough, the way men do when they can't say what they mean. "You're not dead yet, Brennan. Stop acting like it." He walked down the driveway, hands in his pockets, and didn't look back. The next day, 3:15, Walt stood at the mailbox with the same expectation of nothing: bills, a credit card offer, something from the electric company, and a handwritten envelope, Columbus postmark. No return address, but he knew the handwriting. He'd seen it on birthday cards and grocery lists and 100 permission slips he'd signed without reading. Emma, he carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, didn't open it, made dinner, sandwich, chips, a glass of water, because beer felt like giving up, ate in front of the evening news, which was all politics and weather and things that didn't matter, washed his plate, dried it, put it away. The envelope sat on the table like something waiting to detonate. At 9 p.m. he opened it. Her handwriting was shaky, like she'd written it more than once, and this was the version she'd settled for. Dad, I know I don't have the right to ask anything. I know what we did, what I did. I've thought about it every day since, and I still don't have words that make it okay because it wasn't okay. But Tyler's getting married. December 14th. Small ceremony, just family. He wants you there. We all want you there. I'm sorry. I've been sorry every day since. Please, Dad. Please. Emma Walt read it 3 times. The paper was thin, the kind you buy in bulk, and he could see the shadow of his fingers through it. He set it down, went to bed, didn't sleep. In the morning, he didn't answer it, but he didn't throw it away either. Emma's voice on the phone sounded exactly like her mother's used to, before Carol learned to sound like someone else. A week after the letter, Walt was standing at the kitchen sink when his phone buzzed. He almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers were usually scams, car warranties, solar panels, someone pretending to be the IRS. But something made him pick up. Dad? The word hit him like a hand on a bruise. Emma. Silence. He could hear her breathing, the faint static of a connection, stretched across 100 miles of Ohio highway. She was in Columbus, probably in her apartment, the one he'd never seen, in a neighborhood he couldn't picture. I didn't know if you'd answer, she said. Almost didn't. I know. Another pause. Did you get my letter? I got it. And? He looked out the window at the empty bird feeder, the one he'd stopped filling in August. I'm thinking. That's fair. Her voice cracked on the second word, and suddenly she was crying, the way she used to when she was small and something was too big for her to carry. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. What I said at the party, I didn't. Lindsay said it would be. She said Mom needed. I know what Lindsay said. Emma went quiet. Walt gripped the edge of the counter. 3 years of silence, and now her voice in his ear, and he didn't know what to do with any of it. You said best day ever. I know. You pumped your fist. I know, Dad, I know. She was sobbing now, the ugly kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep. I was trying to be supportive. Mom was finally standing up for herself, and Lindsay said we had to show we were on her side, and I didn't think you'd actually leave. You told me to. I didn't think you'd listen. The words hung there, terrible and true. Walt closed his eyes. The coffee maker gurgled behind him, finishing its cycle, filling the kitchen with that familiar sound. He thought about all the mornings he'd stood in this exact spot, making breakfast for people who weren't here anymore, keeping a routine that no longer had a reason. The wedding, he said. Tyler's wedding. Emma sniffled, pulling herself together. December 14th. It's small, just family, Sarah's family, and us. He really wants you there, Dad. He's been talking about it for months. Has he? He's afraid to call. He thinks you hate him. I don't hate anyone. I told him that. I told him you were never. She stopped, started again. He clapped because I clapped, because Lindsay started it and we all just followed, like idiots, like sheep. Walt said nothing. Sarah wants to meet you, Emma continued, rushing now, filling the silence with words. She's really great, Dad. She's a nurse. She works with kids. She's from Cleveland. Good family. Tyler's happy. He's really happy. That's good. Will you come, please? He needs his father there. Walt thought about Tyler at 8 years old, holding a baseball glove that was too big for him, waiting in the backyard for a game of catch that Walt kept promising and kept postponing. He thought about Tyler at 16, asking to borrow the car, and Walt saying yes without looking up from the paper. He thought about Tyler at the retirement party, clapping with that uncertain look on his face, glancing at Lindsay for permission. He needed his father at a lot of things, Walt said. Emma's breath caught. So did we, she whispered. The line went quiet. Walt could hear a car passing on Emma's end, the distant sound of a city he didn't know. Lindsay will be there, Emma said finally. At the wedding. I figured. She's different now. She's been in therapy. She knows what she did was wrong. She wants to apologize, really apologize, not just therapy. Dad, People learn a lot of words in therapy. Doesn't mean they believe them. Emma exhaled, slow and frustrated. And for a second, she sounded exactly like her mother used to during arguments Walt never won. She's trying, that's all I'm saying. She's trying to make it right. Some things don't get made right. So that's it? You're just gonna... I didn't say that. Walt rubbed his eyes with his free hand. The kitchen felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. I said I'm thinking. That's what I'm doing. Thinking. About what? About 3 years of silence. About a room full of people, watching his family clap while his marriage got read out loud like a verdict. About the sound his daughter made. Best day ever, like she was at a baseball game, like something good had happened. About whether I can sit in a room with people who did what you did and pretend it's fine, he said. Emma didn't answer. I'll call you, Walt said, when I decide. Dad. He hung up, not angry, just empty. The coffee maker clicked off. The house settled into its familiar silence. Walt stood there for a long time, phone in hand, looking at nothing. That evening, Doug showed up with a six-pack and the look of a man who'd heard something through the neighborhood grapevine. Emma called, Walt said before Doug could ask. I know. How the hell do you know? Marianne Kowalski saw you on the phone through the window, told her sister. Her sister told me at the gas station. Doug shrugged, settling into his porch chair. Small town. Goddamn small town. Yep. Doug cracked a beer, handed one to Walt. So, what'd she say? Walt took the beer but didn't open it. The cold of the can felt good against his palm, something solid and real. Tyler's getting married. December. They want me there. They? Emma. Tyler, apparently. Maybe the others. I don't know. Doug whistled low. That's something. That's something. Walt agreed. They sat in silence. The streetlights had come on, casting orange pools on the sidewalk. A few houses down, someone was raking leaves in the dark, the scratch of it carrying on the wind. What are you gonna do? Doug asked. I don't know. You know they're not gonna stop calling. You answer once, the door's open. I know. So, Walt finally cracked the beer, took a long drink, let the cold of it settle in his chest. She said they didn't think I'd actually leave. Doug grunted. That's rich. She said they were supporting Carol, standing up for her, like it was a cause. A cause. Doug shook his head. Jesus Christ. Emma was 24. Tyler was 27. They did what Lindsay told them to do. And Lindsay? Lindsay knew exactly what she was doing. Another silence. The wind picked up, rattling the storm door. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and went quiet. Marie and I had our rough years, Doug said, not looking at Walt, before she got sick. Said things to each other we shouldn't have, things that stuck. There was a stretch there, maybe 2 years, where I slept on the couch more nights than not. Thought about leaving. She probably thought about it too. What changed? She got diagnosed. Doug took a drink. Funny how that works. You spend years fighting about nothing, and then something real shows up and all that nothing disappears. He picked at the label on his beer. Point is, I said things I can't take back. So did she. And then one day there was no time left to fix it. This is different. How? Walt didn't have an answer. You're not wrong to be angry, Doug said. What they did was horse shit. Public horse shit, which is worse. But wrong's got an expiration date. After that, it's just habit. And you saying I should forgive them? I'm saying you should figure out what you actually want. Not what they took from you. What you want now. Doug finished his beer, set the empty on the porch rail. You got a grandson coming, probably? Grandkids after that. You want to be the guy they never met because he couldn't let go of the worst day of his life? Walt looked at the window where the light from his workshop caught the edge of the unfinished birdhouse. I don't know what I want, he said. Then figure it out. Doug stood, knees cracking. I'll see you tomorrow. Doug. The older man paused. Thanks. Doug nodded once, the way men do when words aren't enough and aren't necessary. He walked down the driveway, hands in his pockets, and disappeared into the dark. Walt stayed on the porch until the cold drove him inside. He washed the dishes, turned off the lights, walked past Emma's letter, still sitting on the kitchen table. He didn't answer it, not yet. But he didn't throw it away either. Tyler's voice was his mother's too. Careful, practiced, saying only the words that wouldn't start a fire. The call came a week after Emma's, on a Tuesday evening when Walt was eating leftover chili and watching the Cavs lose by 12. His phone lit up with the Columbus area code, and he knew, before he answered, Dad? Different than Emma. Tyler didn't cry. Tyler held everything in, always had, even as a boy. When his goldfish died, he'd flushed it himself and never mentioned it again. When he broke his arm falling off the garage roof at 9 years old, He walked into the kitchen, holding it at a wrong angle, and said, calm as anything, I think something's broken. Tyler. Emma said she called. She said that you were thinking about it. The wedding. I'm thinking. Okay. A pause. The sound of a TV in the background, or maybe a radio. Tyler lived in an apartment in German Village now. Walt had looked it up once, scrolling through pictures of brick streets and old houses he'd never see. I just wanted to, I don't know, tell you about it, I guess, if that's okay. Walt muted the game. Tell me. And Tyler did. The words came slow at first, then faster like water finding a crack. The venue was a restaurant Sarah's aunt owned, place called the Olive Branch, 40 seats max. Sarah wanted sunflowers because they were her grandmother's favorite. The ceremony would be short. Neither of them were religious, but they'd written their own vows. Tyler had already practiced his twice and cried both times. She sounds good, Walt said, when Tyler paused for breath. Sarah, she is. Something softened in Tyler's voice. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean that. She's a pediatric nurse, works at Nationwide Children's. 12-hour shifts, crazy hours, but she loves it. Kids love her. Cleveland, Emma said. Yeah, her family's still there. Her dad runs a hardware store in Parma. Old school guy, reminds me of... Tyler stopped. Of? Nothing. Just, he's a good man. You'd like him. Walt let that sit. He could hear what Tyler almost said. Reminds me of you, or maybe reminds me of who I thought you were. Hard to know which was worse. She wants to meet you, Tyler said. I've told her a lot about you, about us. The fishing trips up at Mosquito Lake, remember? And the baseball games. You took me to see the Indians play the Yankees when I was 10. Jeter hit a home run. I remember. And she knows about that stuff, the good stuff. Before things got... He trailed off. Walt finished for him. Before things got... Silence. I didn't know what Mom was going to do, Tyler said, quieter now. At the party, I swear I didn't know until she stood up, and then Lindsay started clapping, and Emma followed, and I didn't know what else to do. Everyone was looking. You could have not clapped. I know. You could have walked out. Come found me after, said something. I know, Dad, I know. Tyler's voice cracked, just barely, a fault line showing. I think about it every day. What I should have done, what I didn't do. I was a coward. Walt closed his eyes. The Cavs played on in silence, men running up and down the court chasing something that didn't matter. They gave you something, right? Tyler said. For your years. I remember seeing a box. A nice one, velvet or something. A watch. Yeah. Do you ever wear it? Walt thought about the drawer, the Seiko sitting there in the dark. 38 years of his life, reduced to a circle of metal and a leather band. No. Why not? Doesn't seem right? Dad, Tyler's voice was gentle now, more gentle than Walt deserved. You earned it. Whatever happened after, you still earned it. 38 years. That's more than most people give to anything. Walt didn't answer. Couldn't. I want you at my wedding, Tyler said. Not because of Mom, not because Emma asked, not because of any of that, because you're my father, and I'm getting married, and I want you there when I do. The game went to commercial. Some car ad, bright colors, a family laughing. I'll think about it, Walt said. That's all I'm asking. They stayed on the line a moment longer, neither speaking. Then Tyler said goodnight and hung up, and the house was quiet again. 3 days later, the email came. Walt didn't check his inbox often, mostly spam, pharmacy reminders, the occasional newsletter from the VA he'd never signed up for. But something made him look that Thursday morning, coffee cooling in his hand, and there it was. From Lindsay Brennan. Subject, I'd like to talk. He stared at the name for a long time before clicking. Dad, I understand if you don't want to respond to this. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I would like the opportunity to explain, not justify, explain what led to the choices I made 3 years ago. I've spent a lot of time in therapy working through my own patterns and behaviors. I've come to understand that what we did at your retirement party was harmful in ways I didn't fully recognize at the time. I was operating from a place of pain, and I channeled that pain in a direction that caused more damage than I intended. You always said, you do what you have to do. I thought I was doing that. I thought I was protecting Mom. I see now that I was also punishing you for things I never told you about, and that wasn't fair. If you're willing to talk in person or by phone, I would appreciate the chance. If not, I understand. Lindsay. Walt read it twice, then a third time. The tone was Lindsay through and through, structured, controlled, careful. Every sentence measured. Even her apology sounded like a performance review, acknowledging deficiencies, proposing corrective action, requesting a follow-up meeting. But that line, you do what you have to do. He remembered saying it 15 years ago, maybe more. Lindsay at the kitchen table, 17 years old, asking why he worked so many double shifts when mom was always tired, and Emma needed help with homework, and Tyler had a game that weekend. You do what you have to do, he told her. That's what being a man is. You show up, you provide, the rest takes care of itself. She'd looked at him with something he hadn't recognized then. Disappointment, maybe, or the beginning of something harder. He closed the email without responding. The next afternoon, a car pulled into the driveway. Walt was in the workshop, sanding the birdhouse he still didn't know what to do with, when he heard the engine. He looked through the window and went still. Carol's Camry. Silver, same one she'd had for years. She sat behind the wheel, not moving, hands on the steering wheel, like she was working up the nerve to come inside. He didn't go out. After 10 minutes, she backed out and drove away. Walt stood at the window, sawdust on his hands, heart doing something he didn't want to name. She came back the next day. This time he opened the door. She looked older, thinner. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She wore a coat he didn't recognize, something expensive looking, and she clutched her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I'm not here for me, she said before he could speak. I'm here because Emma asked. So you're here for Emma. Don't. They stood in the doorway, cold air leaking in around them. Neither moved to invite the other inside. They need you at that wedding, Carol said. Tyler needs his father there. Whatever happened between us, this isn't about us. Isn't it? It shouldn't be. She looked past him, into the house, taking in whatever she could see. The same furniture, the same pictures on the wall, the same life, minus her. I didn't come to fight. Then why'd you come? Because our son is getting married, and he's afraid to call you himself? And someone had to... She stopped, took a breath. He needs you, Walter. They all do, even if they don't know how to say it. They said plenty 3 years ago. Carol flinched. Small, barely visible, but there. I know. You read it out loud, in front of everyone I worked with. 38 years, and you read the divorce filing like a press release. I know. So why should I believe anything's different now? She didn't answer right away. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the porch. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. He needed a lot of things I didn't give him, she said. That's what Emma told me you said. Walt didn't respond. That's new. Carol looked at him, really looked for the first time. You admitting that? You never used to admit anything? Been doing a lot of thinking. 3 years is a lot of time. Not as much as 38. And something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, or grief. She looked like a woman standing at the edge of something she couldn't name. I should go, she said. Probably. She turned, took 2 steps, then stopped. Her back was to him, shoulders tight under that expensive coat. I didn't want it to happen like that, she said. At the party, Lindsay said it would give me power. After all those years of feeling like I didn't have any. She paused. She was wrong. Walt watched her. The way she held herself, the way she couldn't meet his eyes. Did it, he asked, give you power? Carol turned her head, just slightly. He could see the edge of her profile, the tight line of her mouth. No, she said. It made me feel like a monster. She walked to her car, got in, drove away without looking back. Walt stood in the doorway until the cold became unbearable. Then he went inside, closed the door, and sat in the kitchen with the lights off. Something had shifted. He didn't know what yet, but he could feel it, like a crack in the ice, spreading slow and certain towards something he wasn't ready to see. Lindsay stood on his porch like a lawyer at a deposition, file folder in hand, apology scripted, and not a single word of it true. First Saturday of November. Sky the color of dishwater, wind cutting through the bare trees. Walt had been in the workshop when he heard the car door, and something in the way it slammed told him it wasn't Doug. She looked different than he remembered. Older, sure, 3 years would do that. But something else too. Thinner, sharper. Her hair pulled back tight, her coat pressed, her shoes the kind that cost more than his first car. She held the folder against her chest like armor. Dad. Lindsay. They stood there, father and daughter, with 3 years of silence, and a retirement party between them. Can I come in? He shouldn't have let her. He knew that even as he stepped aside. But there was something about seeing your own child on the porch, something that bypassed the brain and went straight to the bone. She walked into the living room and didn't sit down. Her eyes moved over the furniture, the pictures on the mantel, the kitchen doorway where Carol used to stand, taking inventory, making notes. I came to apologize, she said. Properly. So apologize. She opened the folder. Walt almost laughed. She had notes, bullet points. Probably typed them herself. Double-spaced, spell-checked. I've been working with a therapist for the past 18 months, she said. We've been unpacking a lot of generational trauma and communication dysfunction. I've come to understand that what happened at your retirement party was harmful in ways I didn't fully appreciate at the time. Harmful? Yes, the public nature of it was inappropriate. I should have advocated for a private conversation between you and Mom. Instead of, that's your apology. Walt crossed his arms. You should have been private? Lindsay's jaw tightened. I'm trying to, You wrote her speech. The folder lowered an inch. What? Emma told me. You wrote the speech Carol read. Every word of it. You rehearsed them. Tyler, Emma, all of it. You turned my retirement party into a goddamn courtroom, and you were the prosecutor. Guess that's not... Lindsay started again. The situation was more complicated than complicated. Walt felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd kept sealed for 3 years. I worked at that plant for 38 years. 38 years, Lindsay. I miss things. I know I miss things, but I showed up every day so you could have braces in college and a car that didn't break down. And you stood in that room with my coworkers, people I'd known longer than I'd known you, and you clapped while your mother read my death sentence. And it wasn't a death sentence. What would you call it? A boundary. Her voice was rising now, the therapy polish cracking. Mom needed to set a boundary, and she was too scared to do it alone, so I helped her. That's all I did. I helped her. You ambushed me. You were never there. The words exploded out of her, 3 years of pressure finally releasing. You don't get to stand there like some victim when you were never there. Not for Mom, not for Tyler, not for Emma, not for me. You were present. That's not the same thing. Her hands were shaking now. The folder hung forgotten at her side. You know what Mom told me when I was 14? She said, that's just how he is. He works. He provides. That's his love. And I believed her. I waited for you to show up some other way, and you never did. Well, the kitchen fell silent. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. 14, Walt said. Lindsay's eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. She'd never been a crier. Even as a little girl, she'd held it in, swallowed it down, turned it into something harder. My championship game, she said. Regionals, I scored 3 goals, best game I ever played. Walt remembered, or thought he did. A phone call from Carol, something about a game, something about Lindsay, but there was a situation at the plant, a machine down, and he'd told Carol he'd make the next one. I looked for you, Lindsay said. Every time I came off the field, I looked in the stands. I thought, he's just late. He's coming. He'll be here. There was something at work. There was always something at work. She laughed, but it was bitter, broken. I sat in the parking lot after, for an hour, waiting for your truck. Mom finally came and found me, and you know what I said? I said, maybe he got lost. And she just looked at me with this face, this pitying face, and I knew you weren't coming. You'd never been coming. Walt didn't speak, couldn't. I quit the team that year. Did you know that? He shook his head. No, you didn't, because you never asked. The silence that followed was heavier than anything he'd ever lifted at the plant. He thought about that girl in the parking lot, 15 years ago, watching for a truck that never came. He'd been at Harmon. Machine 7 was down. He'd fixed it by midnight, come home, fallen into bed without checking on anyone. He walked to the bedroom, came back with the watch, set it on the table between them. 38 years, he said. This is what I have to show for it. A watch in a drawer and a family that celebrated getting rid of me. Lindsay looked at it, the gold case catching the gray light, the leather band, still stiff because he'd never worn it. Is that supposed to make me feel guilty? It's supposed to make you see. His voice was steady, but barely. I gave everything I knew how to give. It wasn't enough. I understand that now. But you didn't have to destroy me in public. You didn't have to make my grandchildren watch their grandfather get humiliated. We didn't have... Emma was 24, Tyler was 27. They clapped because you told them to. They didn't know any better. He met her eyes. But you did. Lindsay grabbed her folder, the therapy notes, the bullet points, all of it crumpled in her grip. I came here to apologize. I didn't come here to be attacked. Then we're even. I went to that party to retire, not to be executed. She walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the knob. You want to blame me, she said, without turning around. Fine, blame me. But don't pretend you didn't build this. Don't pretend you weren't gone long before we told you to leave. The door opened, closed. Her car started, backed out, disappeared down Elderberry Street. Walt stood in the kitchen, alone. The watch sat on the table, catching the last of the afternoon light. He didn't put it back in the drawer. Carol called at midnight, not crying, not yelling, just hollow. And Walt knew before she spoke that something had finally broken that couldn't be fixed. But that call came later. First, there were the days after Lindsay left. The house felt different. Walt couldn't name it exactly. The walls were the same, the furniture unmoved, the coffee maker still kicking on at 5:17 like clockwork. But something had shifted. The confrontation had left residue, like smoke after a fire, and he moved through rooms that no longer felt entirely his. He didn't answer the door when Doug knocked, saw the shadow through the curtain, heard the voice. "Walt, you in there?" And stayed in his chair, silent, until the footsteps retreated. He needed to be alone with what Lindsay had given him, the parking lot, 15 years ago. A girl sitting in her mother's car, watching for a truck that never came. He tried to remember that day. November, probably. Regionals would have been in November. He remembered the plant, the machine going down, the panic in the foreman's voice. He remembered working until his shoulders burned, until the thing was fixed and running again. He remembered driving home at midnight, letting himself in quiet, assuming everyone was asleep. He'd never asked about the game. The next morning, probably, Lindsay had been at the breakfast table, quiet. He'd thought she was tired. Teenagers were always tired. He'd eaten his eggs, kissed Carol on the cheek, gone back to work. That was the year she quit soccer. He knew that now. He hadn't known it then, or if he'd known, he hadn't registered it. One day she played, the next she didn't. Kids changed interests, that was normal. Except it wasn't. She hadn't changed interests. She'd given up on him. Walt walked through the house, touching things. The photos on the mantel he'd never taken down. Emma at 6, front teeth missing, grinning at the camera. Tyler, in his Little League uniform, bat over his shoulder, Lindsay in her graduation gown. She wasn't smiling in that one. He'd never noticed before. Her mouth was set in a line, her eyes somewhere else, her mortarboard slightly crooked. She looked like someone enduring something rather than celebrating it. He wondered if he'd been there that day. He must have been. He remembered a gymnasium, folding chairs, names being called, but he couldn't remember her walking across the stage. Couldn't remember if he'd clapped or cheered or done any of the things fathers were supposed to do. Maybe he had. Maybe he'd done all of it, and she'd looked into the crowd and seen a stranger anyway. He sat at the kitchen table as the light faded. The watch still lay where he'd left it, gold catching the last gray glow of afternoon. He didn't touch it. Outside, the wind stripped the last leaves from the maple in the front yard. By morning, the branches would be bare. Winter coming early, the way it did some years. Sudden and absolute, no room for argument. The call came 3 nights later. Walt was half asleep in his chair, television murmuring, when his phone buzzed. The screen said Carol, and his chest tightened before he could stop it. "Hello?" "She won't stop crying." Carol's voice was flat, drained of everything. "She's been in her room for 2 days. Whatever you said to her, I told her the truth. You told her she destroyed you." "She did." Silence on the line. Walt could hear something in the background. A door closing, maybe, or footsteps on stairs. Carol, somewhere in the house they used to share, the house he'd paid off, walking through rooms full of furniture he'd bought and memories he'd built. "She was trying to protect me," Carol said. "That's all she was ever trying to do." From what? The words came out harder than he intended. "I never raised a hand to you. Never raised my voice." What was she protecting you from? The pause that followed was long enough to hold 38 years. "From being invisible," Carol said. "From spending 3 decades wondering if your husband even saw you." As Walt opened his mouth, closed it. "You were a good provider, Walter. Everyone said so. Carol's so lucky. Walt works so hard. Walt takes care of everything. And you did. You paid the bills. You fixed the roof. You showed up every day and did your job." Her voice cracked, just barely. You were never really here. Even when you were home, you were already gone. Thinking about the plant, worrying about the next shift. We were just the place you slept." He wanted to argue. He wanted to list all the things he'd done. The baseball games, the birthday parties, the vacations to Cedar Point where he'd waited in line for 2 hours so Tyler could ride the Millennium Force. He'd been there. He'd been present. Present isn't the same as there. Lindsay's words? Or Carol's? They sounded the same now. "I didn't want it to happen like that," Carol said. "At the party." Lindsay said it would give me power. After all those years of feeling powerless, she said it would be a statement that people would see me standing up for myself. And did they? I don't know what they saw. Her voice was barely a whisper now. "I just know what I felt, standing there, reading those words, watching your face." Walt closed his eyes. He could still feel it, the room, the cake, the knife in his hand, the moment before the world split in two. "What did you feel?" he asked. Carol didn't answer for a long time. When she did, her voice was someone else's, someone he'd never met, or maybe someone he'd never bothered to know. "Like a monster," she said. "I felt like a monster." The line went quiet. Walt could hear Carol breathing, the soft static of a connection carrying 38 years of marriage and 3 years of silence. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Back then. If you felt invisible, why didn't you say something?" "I did." Her laugh was small and broken. 100 times, Walter. In 100 different ways, you just didn't hear it. He tried to remember. Conversations in the kitchen. Arguments that went nowhere. Carol saying, "We never talk anymore." And him saying, "We're talking right now," and thinking that was enough. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said. "Working. Providing. I thought that was what you wanted." I wanted you, not your paycheck. You." The words landed like stones in still water. He felt the ripples moving through him, disturbing things he'd kept settled for decades. "I'm sorry," he said. He heard her breath catch. A small sound, almost nothing, but he knew her well enough to recognize it. Surprise. After 38 years, he could still surprise her. "What?" "I'm sorry. For not hearing you. For not seeing—" He stopped. The words felt strange in his mouth, like a language he'd forgotten. "I didn't know how to be what you needed. I only knew how to work. That's all my father taught me. Show up. Provide. The rest takes care of itself." "It doesn't, though." "No, it doesn't." Another silence. Longer this time. The television still murmured in the background. Some late-night talk show. Laughter from an audience that didn't know anything about parking lots or retirement parties or the slow erosion of a family. "She's not okay," Carol said finally. "Lindsay, whatever you said to her, she's not okay. She keeps saying she ruined everything, that she made it worse." "She did make it worse. I know. But she was trying to help me, in her own way, the only way she knew how." Walt thought about that. Lindsay, at 14, watching for his truck. Lindsay at 17, asking why he worked so many doubles. Lindsay at 31, standing in that conference room, clapping like her life depended on it. She'd been angry for so long. He just hadn't seen it. "I have to go," Carol said. "She needs me." "Okay." "Walt?" "Yeah?" A pause. He could almost see her standing in the hallway of the house he'd paid for, phone pressed to her ear, caught between the daughter upstairs and the husband, who wasn't a husband anymore. "Thank you," she said, "for saying sorry. I didn't think you ever would." The line went dead. Walt sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. The coffee maker was off. The house was silent. Not even the furnace running, just the deep quiet of a November night, the kind that pressed against the windows like something waiting to get in. He thought about every double shift, every missed dinner. Every time he'd come home late and found the kids already in bed, Carol already asleep or pretending to be. He'd told himself he was sacrificing for them, building something, giving them a better life than he'd had, but maybe he'd just been hiding. Work was simple. Work made sense. You put in the hours, you got the results. Machines broke down, you fixed them. Problems had solutions. There was a satisfaction in that, a clarity that home never offered. Home was complicated. Home required things he didn't know how to give. Conversations that went in circles. Feelings he couldn't diagnose, needs he couldn't meet with a wrench or a spreadsheet. So he'd stayed at the plant and called it love, and they'd learned to live without him. And when they finally told him to go, he was already gone. Had been for years. They just made it official. He put his head in his hands. For the first time since the retirement party, Walt Brennan cried, not for what they'd done to him, for what he hadn't done for them. The sobs came hard and ugly, the kind he hadn't allowed himself since his father's funeral 20 years ago. His shoulders shook, his chest ached. The tears fell onto the kitchen table, onto the wood Carol had picked out, in the house they'd built together, in the life he'd let slip away while he was busy fixing machines. He cried until there was nothing left. Then he sat in the silence, emptied out, staring at the watch that still lay on the table. 38 years of excellence. He'd been so proud of that number. Now it just measured the time he wasn't somewhere else. Morning came gray and cold. Walt hadn't slept. He'd sat in the kitchen until dawn, leaked through the windows, then made coffee out of habit, the ritual carrying him when nothing else could. At 8 o'clock, he called Emma. "Dad?" She sounded surprised. He never called first. "Is everything okay?" "Tell me about Lindsay. When she was 14, silence. What about her? Tell me what I missed." He heard Emma moving, a door closing, footsteps, the creak of a chair, finding somewhere private, somewhere safe to say the things that had never been said. "The championship game," Emma said slowly. "You want to know about the championship game?" "Yeah." She doesn't talk about it, even now. It's like this locked room. Mom and I know not to bring it up. "Tell me anyway." Emma took a breath. She was amazing that day. 3 goals, best game she ever played. Coach said she could have gone to state, maybe even gotten a scholarship if she'd kept playing. She was that good. Walt closed his eyes. She kept looking at the stands. Every time she came off the field, every water break, she'd look. I was only 11, but I remember. She'd look, and then her face would do this thing, this little fall. And then she'd go back out and play even harder, like she was trying to prove something. I wasn't there. No. I was at the plant. Machine went down. I know, Mom told us. I said I'd make the next one. There wasn't a next one. Emma's voice was quiet now. She quit that week. Told Mom she didn't like soccer anymore. Mom knew that wasn't true, but Lindsay wouldn't talk about it, just shut that door, locked it. Walt gripped the phone. The coffee maker gurgled behind him, filling the kitchen with its familiar sound, and for a moment he was back in that house 15 years ago, eating eggs at the counter, not noticing that his daughter had stopped smiling. She waited for you, Emma said. After the game, sat in the parking lot for an hour. Mom finally found her in the car, just sitting there, still in her uniform. She'd been crying, but by then her face was dry. She just looked empty. I didn't know. You didn't ask. The words hit like the end of something. She's been angry at you since then, Emma continued. Not like yelling angry, like cold angry. Like she decided something about you that day, and nothing ever changed it. And then when Mom started talking about the divorce, Lindsay just took over, made it her mission. I think she thought if she could punish you enough, it would fix something. Make up for that parking lot. Did it? No. Emma's voice cracked. It made everything worse. She won't admit it, but I can see it. She's more miserable now than she was before. She destroyed you, and it didn't heal anything. It just made more wreckage. Walt stared at the watch on the table, gold catching the morning light. 38 years of excellence, and a daughter who'd spent 15 years waiting for him to see her. I didn't know, he said again. It was all he had. I know, Dad. Emma was crying now, soft and tired. But you could have. That's what hurts. You could have asked. Any of us. Any time. And you didn't. She was right. That was the thing he couldn't escape. They'd done something terrible to him. But he'd done something terrible first. Not in one moment, not in one clapping crowd, but in 1,000 small absences that added up to abandonment. Both things were true. He couldn't undo either one. I'm sorry, he said. Tell Lindsay. Tell her I'm sorry about the parking lot. About all of it. You should tell her yourself. I will, when I can find the words. He hung up. The coffee maker clicked off. The house settled into silence. Walt sat alone at the table, the watch in front of him, the morning light growing slowly brighter. He didn't know what came next. But for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't sure he'd been the only one who was wronged. Snow came early that year, 2 inches on the ground by the second week of November, and Walt Brennan walked through it like a man learning to move without a map. He stopped answering the phone. Emma called twice. He let it ring. Tyler sent a text. Thinking of you, Dad. And he read it, but didn't respond. Even Doug's knocks went unanswered, though Walt saw him through the window, standing on the porch with a coffee thermos and a look of worried patience. He wasn't angry anymore. That was the strange thing. The anger had burned itself out somewhere in that long night at the kitchen table, leaving behind something quieter, something heavier. He didn't have a word for it yet. He walked. Every morning after coffee, he put on his boots and his old canvas jacket and walked the neighborhood, past houses he'd known for decades. Past the Kowalski's place with the nativity they put up too early every year, past the empty lot where the Hendersons' house used to stand before the fire in '09. The snow crunched under his feet, and his breath made clouds in the cold air, and he didn't think about anything except the next step. One morning, he walked past St. Michael's. He hadn't been inside since the divorce, hadn't seen the point. God hadn't stopped Carol from reading those papers, hadn't stopped his kids from clapping, hadn't done a damn thing except watch. But he found himself standing in the parking lot anyway, hands in his pockets, looking at the doors. Mass was ending. People filed out in their Sunday clothes, shaking Father Bennett's hand, laughing at things he couldn't hear. Families, couples, kids running ahead to the car while their parents called after them. He watched a man about his age help his wife down the steps. She was using a cane, moving slow, and the man held her elbow with the kind of patient attention that said he'd been doing it for years. They reached the bottom, and she said something, and he laughed. A real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep. Walt turned and walked home. That evening, he ended up at the plant. Harmon Manufacturing, 38 years. He parked across the street and sat in his truck with the engine off, watching the building like it owed him something. Half the windows were dark now. Layoffs last spring had cut the workforce in half, and the night shift was a skeleton crew. The parking lot that used to be full at 7 o'clock held maybe 20 cars. A security light buzzed near the loading dock, casting an orange pool on the concrete. He'd given this place everything, his back, his knees, his best years. He'd missed birthdays and anniversaries and championship games because Machine 7 was down, or the quarterly numbers were bad, or someone had to stay late, and he was the one who always stayed. He'd told himself it mattered, that he was building something, that the sacrifice would pay off in the end. But the plant didn't remember him. It just kept running, same as always. with different hands on the machines and different names on the schedule. He could have died the day after retirement, and the line wouldn't have stopped for 5 minutes. A security guard walked past. Young guy. Couldn't have been more than 25. He glanced at Walt's truck, then kept moving, didn't recognize him. Why would he? Walt started the engine and drove home. The workshop was cold when he turned on the light. He'd forgotten to run the space heater, and his breath made small ghosts in the air. The birdhouse sat on the bench where he'd left it weeks ago. Unfinished. Pointless. He didn't even have birds in the yard anymore. Hadn't filled the feeder since August, and they'd all moved on to better territory. He picked it up anyway, ran his thumb over the grain. Good wood. Cedar. He'd bought it at the hardware store back in April, back when spring felt like a promise instead of a lie. Who was it for? He didn't know. He'd started it without thinking, the way he started a lot of projects. Something to do with his hands. Something to fill the hours. But now, holding it in the cold workshop, he wondered if he'd been building it for someone specific all along. Lindsay, maybe. A peace offering. Look what I made for you. Look at me trying. Except she didn't want a birdhouse. She'd wanted him. And he'd given her 38 years at Harmon Manufacturing instead. He set the birdhouse down and walked to the window. Snow was falling again. Soft and steady. The kind that would pile up overnight and make the morning quiet. He could see his reflection in the glass. A 62-year-old man with gray hair and tired eyes, standing alone in a workshop full of unfinished things. You do what you gotta do. He'd said that to Lindsay all those years ago, explaining why he worked so many doubles, why he wasn't home, why the plant came first. She'd thrown it back at him in her email, and he'd felt the sting without understanding why. Now he did. He'd taught her that work was love, that absence was sacrifice, that you proved your worth by what you provided, not by who you were when you showed up. And she'd learned the lesson too well. She'd done what she had to do, protected her mother, punished her father, made a public statement that couldn't be ignored. She'd used his own philosophy against him. The problem was, it was the wrong philosophy. Work wasn't love, sacrifice wasn't presence. You couldn't fix a family the way you fixed a machine, and you couldn't build a relationship out of paychecks and good intentions. He'd been wrong. For 38 years, he'd been wrong. The question now was what to do about it. He stood at the window for a long time. The snow kept falling. The house creaked around him, settling into the cold, and somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and went quiet. He thought about Tyler's wedding, 12 days away, a room full of family, watching his son get married. If he went, what was he forgiving? The cruelty, the public humiliation, the years of silence that followed? If he stayed home, what was he protecting? His pride, his pain, his right to be the wounded party? He didn't know anymore. All he knew was that his son was getting married and his daughters were waiting to see what he would do, and somewhere in Columbus, Lindsay was crying in her childhood bedroom because she'd broken something she didn't know how to fix. He couldn't give her back that championship game. Couldn't give any of them back the years he'd spent at the plant instead of at home. That time was gone. Those versions of themselves, the father he should have been, the children they might have become, were ghosts now, and no amount of apology would bring them back. But he was still here, still breathing, still capable of choosing what happened next. You do what you gotta do. For 38 years, that had meant work, sacrifice, absence dressed up as duty. Maybe it was time to find out what it meant when you chose something else. He didn't wear a suit to face his daughter, just the same work boots he'd worn for 40 years, because if she was going to see him, she was going to see the truth. December 12th, 2 days before the wedding, Walt stood in front of the bathroom mirror, razor in hand, and looked at the man looking back. Gray stubble, tired eyes, the kind of face that had seen too much and said too little. He shaved carefully, the way he used to before important meetings at the plant, chin first, then cheeks, then the tricky spot under his nose. When he finished, he looked almost like someone who had somewhere to be. He walked to the bedroom, opened the drawer. The watch sat where it always sat, gold catching the morning light. 38 years of excellence. He'd left it on the kitchen table after Lindsay's visit, then moved it back here, unable to look at it but unwilling to throw it away. He picked it up. The leather was stiff, never broken in, never worn. The clasp was cold against his fingers. He turned it over, read the engraving for the 100th time. W. Brennan, 38 years. He put it on. The band fit fine. It had always fit fine. He'd been lying when he told Doug it didn't. Lying to himself mostly, pretending the problem was the watch and not the life it represented. He looked at his wrist. The weight of it felt strange. Right, somehow, but strange. He didn't take it off. The call to Emma was short. Tell Lindsay I'll meet her, tomorrow, Murphy's Diner, 10 o'clock. Emma's voice caught. Dad, are you sure? No, but I'm going anyway. She's been a mess. Since she came to see you, she thinks she made everything worse. She did. Silence. But so did I, Walt said, a long time ago. Tell her 10 o'clock. He hung up before Emma could ask more questions. Murphy's Diner hadn't changed in 30 years. Same Formica counters, same red vinyl booths, same smell of coffee and bacon grease that clung to your clothes for hours. Walt had been coming here since before Tyler was born. First with Carol, then alone, then not at all after the divorce. Walking through the door felt like stepping into a museum of his own history. Lindsay was already there. Corner booth, facing the door? She looked up when he came in, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or fear. She looked smaller than she had on his porch, less certain. The pressed coat was gone, replaced by a sweater that looked like she'd slept in it. No folder this time, no bullet points. Just his daughter, waiting. Walt walked over, slid into the booth across from her. The vinyl creaked under his weight, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Thanks for coming," Lindsay said. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying recently, or not sleeping. Probably both. "Didn't think I would." "No, neither did I." A waitress appeared, Darlene, same one who'd been working here since the Clinton administration. "Coffee, hun." "Two," Walt said. "Black." Darlene nodded and disappeared. Lindsay's hands were clasped on the table, knuckles white. She looked like someone waiting for a verdict, which, in a way, she was. "I don't know what to say," she said. "I had things prepared. After last time, I went home and I wrote it all down. Everything I wanted to tell you, everything I should have said instead of—" She stopped, shook her head. "But it all sounds wrong now, like lines from a play." "Then don't say them." "I don't know what else to do." Walt looked at her. Really looked. Past the HR professional, past the therapy language, past the woman who'd stood in his living room with a folder full of bullet points. He looked for the girl underneath, the one who'd sat in a parking lot for an hour, watching for his truck. "Tell me about the game," he said. Lindsay blinked. "What?" "The championship game. When you were 14. Tell me about it." Her face changed. The professional mask cracked, and something raw showed through, something young and hurt and still waiting after all these years. "Why?" "Because I wasn't there, and I should have been, and I want to know what I missed." Darlene came back with the coffee. Set down 2 mugs, a handful of creamers neither of them would use. "Holler if you need anything." She left. The diner noise filled the silence. Forks on plates, the sizzle from the kitchen, someone laughing at the counter. Lindsay wrapped her hands around the mug but didn't drink. "It was cold," she said finally. "November. The field was half frozen, and Coach said we had to be careful on the turns because the grass was slick." She stared into the coffee like it held answers. "I scored in the first 5 minutes. Header off a corner kick. The crowd went crazy." "I didn't know you could do headers." You didn't know a lot of things." "It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. I scored again in the second half, then again with 10 minutes left. Hat trick, the only one I ever got. 3 goals. 3 goals." She looked up at him, and her eyes were wet. "Every time I came off the field, I looked for you. I knew you were supposed to be there. Mom said you'd be late, but you'd come, and I kept looking and looking, and—" Her voice broke. "And you never came." Walt didn't speak. He let her have the silence, let her fill it with whatever she needed to say. After the game, everyone was celebrating. Coach said scouts might come next year. My teammates were hugging me, and I couldn't even feel it. I just kept looking at the parking lot. Lindsay wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Mom found me an hour later, still sitting in the car, still in my uniform. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I saw it on her face. He's not coming. He was never coming. "I was at the plant," Walt said. "Machine 7, I know where you were." But her voice cracked. "You were always at the plant. Every game, every recital, every time I needed you to just show up and be my dad, you were at the plant. I thought I was doing the right thing. I know you did. That's what makes it worse." She laughed, but it was wet and broken. "You weren't even being selfish. You really believed you were sacrificing for us, and I hated you for it. I hated you so much, and you didn't even know." The diner noise faded. Walt could hear his own heartbeat, slow and heavy in his chest. "I wanted you to hurt," Lindsay said. "At the party, I wanted you to feel what I felt all those years. Invisible, unimportant, like nothing you did was ever enough to make someone show up for you. It worked. I know." She was crying now, tears running down her cheeks, and she didn't try to stop them. "And it didn't fix anything. It just made me into someone I don't want to be." Walt reached across the table. Lindsay flinched, just slightly, a reflex, but she didn't pull away. He took her hand. Her fingers were cold from the coffee mug, and they trembled against his palm. "I can't give you back that game," he said. "Can't give you back any of it. All those years I wasn't there, they're gone. And I'm sorry. Not sorry the way you wanted me to be. Sorry for what I actually did. Dad, let me finish. He tightened his grip, just enough to hold her there. "I wasn't there. I told myself work was love, and it wasn't. It was hiding. I hid from your mother, from you kids, from everything that scared me. Because being at the plant was easier than being at home. And you paid for that. You all did. Lindsay's hand shook in his. You had every right to be angry, he said. You didn't have the right to do what you did. Both things are true. You understand? She nodded, barely. I'm going to Tyler's wedding, not because you apologized. Because he's my son, and he's getting married, and I want to be there. He paused. And I want you there too. Not because we're okay. We're not okay. But because we're family, and maybe that still means something. Does it? Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. We'd have to find out. She looked at him, really looked. The way she used to, when she was small, and he was the biggest thing in her world. Before the disappointments, before the parking lot, before 30 years of silence dressed up as stoicism. How? She asked. We start over, from nothing. Nothing? Clean slate? No more keeping score. No more old wounds. We just... He searched for the words. We try, and we see what happens. Lindsay's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked 14 again. Not the HR professional, not the prosecutor at his retirement party, just a girl who'd waited too long for her father to see her. I'm sorry, she said, for the party, for the speech, for making you... I know. I should have just talked to you years ago. I should have told you how I felt instead of... I know. He squeezed her hand. I should have asked. They sat there, father and daughter, in a corner booth at Murphy's Diner, holding on to each other across 3 years of silence and 15 years of hurt. The coffee went cold. Neither of them touched it. I don't know how to do this, Lindsay said finally. Start over. I don't know what that looks like. Neither do I. Walt almost smiled. But I've got time now. 38 years worth of nothing but time. Might as well spend some of it figuring out how to be your father. Lindsay laughed, a real laugh. Surprised out of her, wet and shaky but real. You're wearing the watch? She said. Walt looked at his wrist. The gold face, the leather band, the 38 years of excellence he'd finally decided to claim. Yeah. I thought you said it didn't fit. I was wrong about a lot of things. Lindsay squeezed his hand back. Her grip was stronger now, steadier. 2 days, she said, until the wedding. 2 days. You'll really be there? I'll really be there. She nodded, wiped her face with her free hand, took a breath that shuddered on the way in and came out almost steady. Okay, she said. Okay. They stayed like that for a while longer, not talking, not needing to. The diner hummed around them, and outside the window, the December sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, not completely, but it was a start. The wedding was small, 30 people in a room that could hold 100, and Walt Brennan sat in the second row, wearing a gold watch that finally fit. The olive branch was warm, smelling of garlic and candle wax and something floral Sarah's aunt had sprayed near the entrance. Sunflowers lined the aisle, bright yellow against the white tablecloths, brave and stubborn, the way Sarah's grandmother must have been. Tyler stood at the front in a suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders, fidgeting with his cuffs, looking younger than 31 and older than he'd ever been. Walt watched his son become a husband. The vows were short, no scripture, no officiants in robes, just two people saying what they meant to each other. Tyler's voice cracked twice. Sarah cried and laughed at the same time. When they kissed, the room erupted in applause. And, for a moment, Walt was back in that conference room 3 years ago, hearing a different kind of clapping. But this was different. This was joy. He looked at his wrist. The Seiko caught the candlelight, gold warming against his skin. 38 years of excellence. He'd spent so long thinking of it as evidence of what he'd lost. Now, watching Tyler slide a ring onto Sarah's finger, he understood it differently. He'd shown up. Every day for 38 years, he'd shown up. It wasn't enough. He knew that now. But it wasn't nothing, either. He'd built something. Imperfect, incomplete, but real. And he was still here, still building, still trying to figure out what came next. Emma sat beside him, her hand resting on his arm. She hadn't let go since the ceremony started. On the other side of the aisle, Lindsay sat with Carol, and when Walt's eyes met his eldest daughter's, something passed between them. Not warmth, not yet, but acknowledgement. A door cracked open, light leaking through. They nodded at each other. It was enough. After the reception, Doug was waiting in the parking lot. He leaned against his truck, breath fogging in the December air, hands stuffed in his pockets. He looked cold and stubborn and completely unsurprised to see Walt walking toward him. "Didn't know you were coming," Walt said. "Wasn't gonna miss it." Doug shrugged. "Besides, someone had to make sure you didn't bolt halfway through. Thought about it. I know." Doug studied him. The suit, the watch, the look on his face. But you didn't. No, I didn't. They stood in the cold, snow threatening but not falling yet. Inside, music started up. Something slow, probably Tyler and Sarah's first dance. So what now? Doug asked. Sunday dinners? Christmas cards? Big happy family? I don't know, maybe. Not like before. What's it like then? Walt thought about it. The diner, Lindsay's hand in his, the way Tyler had hugged him after the ceremony, tight and desperate and forgiving all at once. Different, he said. Slower. We're starting from nothing. Nothing's not bad. Doug kicked at a patch of ice on the asphalt. You can build on nothing. Walt almost smiled. The drive home was quiet. Youngstown streets half empty, Christmas lights blinking on porches, the world settling into the kind of stillness that only December knows. He checked the mail, out of habit. The box was empty. For the first time, he didn't mind. There was nothing he was waiting for anymore. Inside, he made coffee, stood at the kitchen window while it brewed, watching the snow finally start to fall. Soft and steady, covering the yard, the street, the mailbox at the end of the driveway. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. The man he was, the man he was becoming. Somewhere between these two, something had shifted. He thought about the retirement party, the cake knife trembling in his grip, his youngest daughter pumping her fist, shouting words that had lived in his chest like shrapnel for 3 years. Best day ever. He'd hated those words, carried them like a wound that wouldn't close. But standing here now, coffee in hand, snow falling. The watch warm against his wrist. He understood something he hadn't before. The best day wasn't about them. It never had been. He spoke to the empty room, voice low, meant for no one but himself. The best day of my life wasn't when they left. It was the morning I stopped waiting for them to come back. He sipped the coffee, watched the snow, let the silence settle around him like a blanket. Tomorrow, there would be phone calls, awkward conversations, the slow, difficult work of rebuilding something from the wreckage. It wouldn't be easy. It might not even be possible. But he was going to try. Not because they deserved it. Not because he owed them. Because he was still here. Still breathing. Still capable of choosing what came next. The snow kept falling. The coffee grew cold in his hands. Walt Brennan stood at the window of the house he'd paid for, in the life he was learning to reclaim, and let himself be still.